Hello, good morning, and welcome to the first ever Lowlands.Community Day. We are really excited to have you here joining us and my best friend, Purnima.
Hello, Callum.
Hello. We're in this for the long haul. We have
Yes.
12 hours, nearly
Yes.
12 hours of solid Umbraco, .NET, Azure, accessibility, everything you want.
Yes,
Some
it's a
fantastic
day
talks
full
lined
of
up.
learning that we've planned for you.
Oh, it is.
And I can see that the
yeah.
chat is really busy in the morning, which is fantastic to see. I can see a lot of our friends from around the world. Lars, who is our first speaker, is already online. And he actually is on the chat saying there may be llamas.
Yeah, I heard he promised llamas, which is incredibly exciting. Maybe we should we even have him on the screen behind us.
Yeah.
We'll Amazing. Lars is going to be joining us all the way from Melbourne, or just outside of Melbourne in Australia. And today we'll be traveling all over the world from different speakers, all the way from India, from Europe, from the US, and beyond. So maybe we should just go into our first talk.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Oh, we can talk to Lars. Hey, Lars.
Hello. How is everybody?
Hey.
Good morning.
Good morning. Or good evening for you. Yeah, we're doing great. How's things on your other side of the world?
It's summer. It's fantastic. Actually, it was kind of cold today. It was weird, but we generally had like 35 degrees in the last few weeks. So
that's awesome. I had the pleasure of being in Australia a few weeks ago as well, and yeah, I've still got the sunburnt nose and everything to prove it. So I'm very jealous right now.
I just go pink and then I go red and then I peel. So it's not worth it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it should be.
This is cool. It turns out you can turn around. It's good because then I'm looking at the screen and then I'm looking at the back of you. How does that work? Anyway.
Yeah, I know. We're still learning here, but
but then it looks better. Yeah. So it turns out I'm like the first of like the Melbourne contingency, it seems.
Indeed.
It's kind of awesome.
Indeed. We have Sarah coming up just after you, who's also in Melbourne.
Yes. Sarah's pretty damn awesome. Looking forward to that.
Indeed, yeah. So Sarah's going to be talking a little bit about security in Azure, which is completely different to what you're going to be talking to us about, Lars. So maybe you want to tell us a little bit about that.
I can. I don't want to give it all away, but basically, I think the pitch was, hey, we'd really like you to open the event. Can you do something fun for 30 minutes? And I went, okay. So that was the brief. And so I've come up with a bit of a collection of, let's not call them horror stories. Let's call them lessons from the software annals of history, which I think is interesting that we can learn a few things from, and maybe people haven't heard of them. I hope they've heard of one of them at least, but maybe not all of them. So that's sort of where we're heading.
That's
exactly
really
the kind of thing that I would like to hear as well. And so is the community, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, let's not wait any longer, Lars. I think
all right.
Let's let you crack on. I'm looking forward to
all right.
this.
Sounds good. I'm going to try and share my screen because otherwise it's not much fun. Hang on. All right. That one. All right. Cool. So now that should work as far as I know. Cool. Well, hi, everybody. And thanks for joining me on this, I'm guessing what is a cold, frosty morning, possibly where some of you are, if you're in Northern Europe, for sure. Yeah, I remember those days. Yeah, let's not go there. So what I've come up with is a bit of, let's get us started, right? It's morning. Gerald's hopefully had some coffee. He was complaining about that in the chat already, so make sure he's got coffee, otherwise we'll never hear the end of it. And I've put together a bit of, let's get us started with software development, but not looking at code, because we don't want to do that first thing, because then it's like, oh God, we already got to use brain cells, we haven't had caffeine, etc. So this is what we're doing. Here is a story of 6 different things that happened in the history of software development. And maybe you know some of them, maybe you don't, but I think they're quite interesting. There's certainly some moments in it that you go, that's probably not a good thing, and maybe we learn from it. But let's start. Does anyone, and I can't see the chat. Let me just make sure I can see the chat, because that makes it more fun. If you can comment, there we go. I'm going to put it over here, and hopefully that'll work, sort of, ish. All right, thanks, Gerald. We've got a bit of a woo. So has anyone heard of the Mars Orbital Lander? So this was way back in 1998. It may even be before some of you were born. It is a possibility now. God, I feel old. Anyway, this thing was rather a vehicle to travel to Mars, and it cost $500 million, and it was going to study the Martian climate, the Martian atmosphere, the surface changes, all those sort of really interesting things if you're into, planetary sciences and all those associated fields and rockets. And it was also a precursor to the next mission, which was, I'm looking at my notes here, the Mars Polar Lander, which was going to come the year after, and this was going to have all the surveys done so they could land. And it was really important, and it was really important for many different parts of what we want to know as scientists and, in general. So 2 companies built this. There was NASA that built one part of it, and then there was Lockheed Martin that built the other part of it. And big project, $500 million, lots and lots of eyes, engineers, developers on this. And you'd think, they would have everything covered, at least from the software side of things, right? But what happened is that NASA was using metric and Lockheed Martin was using imperial measurements, in particular for the, let me just see, I don't want to give you wrong information here. The units of pound seconds instead of Newton seconds. And they didn't make any conversion between the two, which eventually resulted in, well, the thing just went off the radar in September of '99, and they never heard from it since. But that's what they reckoned it was. So, whoops, exactly. That's just one story of what we did as software developers. But we'll get to more of those, and we'll go back to the Mars orbital lander in a bit as well. So then we move on to, I'm just going to look at the chat here, because I always found the chat much more interesting. I want to see what you guys are all saying. So it is a bit cut off. Anyway, we'll make it work. So has anyone here, just put your hand up in the chat. Did you ever use Google+? Anyone? I had a Google+ account. And it was like Google was trying to make like the Facebook kind of thing in 2010, 11, something like that. It was called Google+, and it lived on for many years. And say, yep, there's a few. I knew Gerald was on it. Gerald is on every single social media platform. Yep, there's a few. Exactly. Like we had an account, but I don't think anyone actually used it. Like we all set it up and looked nice, and we posted 3 things, and then we went away. What they had, this Google Plus service had an API, like most things do. And in 2018, Google realized that they had exposed 500,000 people's personal details through an API publicly. There was a vulnerability in the API. And then they sort of went, oh, bugger, that's not good. Let's just move on. And then they had another breach 6 months later where about 50,000 people's details were leaked. And then they went, oh, let's just shut it down. Right. So it actually shut down about 6 months later. But it just shows that no one knew. For 3 years, this vulnerability was here, they found out. No one knew about it. No developers had discovered it. But they know for a fact that details were leaked because they know how many, and they didn't tell anyone. Yay, go Google. So there's many more details to all these stories, and I would encourage you to go look them up. They're really interesting, both as a sort of a sadistic form of entertainment maybe, but also just learning from it, because it's one of those things that we as developers, we get really focused on a thing, right? We're building this interface or this API endpoint or this UX component or whatever it is we're doing. And we sometimes forget to sort of think about the broader picture, right? So, yes, hackers were definitely involved, and it was leaked, and it is on the web. All your data from Google+. Excellent. All right, so blast from the past. Yeah, no kidding. All right, this next one. I don't know if you've ever heard of Knight Capital Group. This is one of the, let's say severe cases. At least financially. No one? Knight Capital Group? Nope, I hadn't heard of it either. But they had this system set up. So they were a trading company, and they traded stock or shares on the American or the New York Stock Exchange, I think it was. And they had this particular system, which was called the Retail Liquidity Program, right? And it was meant to be the all new trading platform, and it would do a whole bunch of calculation algorithms, predictions, move prices higher and lower depending on everything, and a whole bunch of stuff. So what they did is that they had this update to implement this new version of this new Retail Liquidity Program, or RPL, and they deployed it, right? And they ended up deploying it in, I think this was 2012. I can't remember the date now, but they've deployed it to 7 of 8 servers. Yes, you can probably see where this is going now, but you can't. It gets worse. So that server, one of the 8 servers, was not updated with the new code. What they decided to do, the developers, in all their infinite wisdom, was to, I can't believe this. Anyway, this is what happens, is that they had a flag, so like, a feature flag that would turn things on or off. And they reused a flag from the previous version. They reused a flag. They didn't create a new one. They reused it for this new system. So when the new system was implemented, this old flag on one server got triggered by the new code when it shouldn't have. And it took them 45 minutes. 45 minutes. Anyone want to guess how much, and don't Google it because that's cheating, how much money did they lose in 45 minutes? Just, I'll take guesses. It's many. Anyone? Oh God, people haven't had coffee yet. I'm waiting. I do realize there's a delay as well. So we're from you type till, $1 billion. I knew someone would say that. A pound, 2 pounds, almost correct. No, they lost $450 million of the company money in 45 minutes. And this was due to one server not being updated, but also because they did something stupid and they had that feature flag, right? So they had 4 million executions on 154 stocks, and they traded accidentally more than 397 million shares in 45 minutes, and that's what they lost. Yeah. We'll get back to them as well. $1 trillion. That's a lot. That's a lot. All right. So there might have been a few sweaty faces at that point. Yeah. Imagine being that developer. Cheapest. Yeah, it's deployed. It's fine. Yeah. All right. So this is a bit happier story, I think, at least for the people. So there's this in Ohio, it's actually not long ago, it was in the 2000s, there was an ATM that was programmed to dispense $5 bills for certain scenarios. And nothing unusual about that. That's what ATMs do. Nothing special about this, except this particular one, for some reason, out in the middle of nowhere in a small little town in Ohio, decided to dispense $10 notes instead of 5 for the same amount, right? So if you wanted $100 out, you got 20 $10 notes. And this sort of caught on, funny enough, with the town's inhabitants, like with the people in the town. And suddenly there was this, it actually resulted in like a short period of people having a lot more money and spending a lot more money, and the town became more affluent for a short period of time until the bank figured it out. And it sort of became obviously a bit of a frenzy for this one ATM. So yeah, there was just money everywhere, which was, I think that's kind of a cute story, right? And yeah, by the way, that's not Ohio, that's Missouri. That's what Ohio looks like. Yeah, I knew you weren't awake. So yeah, I like that story, mainly if I was in the bank. But anyway, all right, something more nerdy. The Therac 25. Anyone ever heard of that? Does that ring a bell? And now normally I would see a room full of people going yes or no or whatever. Gareth just joined us. What do you reckon, Gareth? You've heard of the Therac 25? No? All right. It's a radiology machine. Back in the late 80s, 90s or something like that. And it was like the state-of-the-art machine at the time for taking x-rays. But there were a little bit of a problem with it, and it resulted in a bit of mayhem. So there was two reasons. There are two errors why this failed. So the first one was that the electron beam could be set for X-ray mode. I don't know what that means. That's what it said. Anyway, and the second one was that the electron beam could be activated during field light mode. And if you know anything about radiology, I'm sure this all makes sense. What it basically means is that they would have people being X-rayed, and because you could click something on and off really quickly on the machine itself, the software didn't register the second, or the first click rather, it would be overridden by the second tap on button or whatever, and people would get like a deadly dose of radiation. I'm not even making it up. Yeah, lethal overdoses of radiation, and it happened at least 6 times because software. So here's one of those stories where you go, oh crap. Okay, as software developers, we do have a bit of a responsibility depending on which industry we're in. I just do presentations, so I can just use GIFs. But you know, yes. All right. This is surely everybody's heard about this. I'm assuming everybody knows what Y2K is, even if you were born after 2000. Anyone don't know what Y2K is? Please let me know. I'm looking at the chat. Oh, Jason's saying he found an Icelandic vending machine. You're very specific. That would give you a Coke and 10 times the change. That's pretty cool. Yeah, everybody. Oh, Gerald was at the computer actually looking at it when it jumped to the year 2000. I think I did that too. I can't remember. Or something. Nothing happened. Well, Gerald says nothing happened. There's a picture there to say that something did happen. That says in French, you know, welcome to the Central School of Nantes. It's now 12:09 on the 3rd of January 1900. So, yeah. I had to update my BIOS on my PC all the time at the time. Yep, there was a lot of those things, right? There's a lot of those things. I worked in telco at the time, and we had to update the entire billing structure for the whole telco company, all mobile customers. And it was this massive 6 months project. Yeah, because we did some simulations and things did break and mobile networks stopped working. So the main things with Y2K that could have happened was we could have like system failures. So, you know, controlling power plants and transportation systems and financial systems, etc. They might have gone bang. That was definitely, you know, a possibility. We could have lost a bunch of data, right? There was a real problem. There was a real chance of losing a lot of data because systems could have misinterpreted the data that they had, and they would have either overwritten it or, you know, not recorded it, or there were many scenarios of why that might have gone bang. Y2K made for a lot of jobs. It did. It's like we created our own job demand kind of thing, like, because software developers screwed it up in the first place, and then we went, oh, but we can fix it too. Yeah. Oh, funny story about that. Now, it made me think of it. So this is you know, we're doing a bit of an informal introduction to the event, or to the community day today. So I worked with a colleague about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and he had code in, or a section of code, and all it was a loop with a weight, right? And then it would say, there was a comment above, I'm not making this up, it was in production. There was a comment above it that said, whenever management wants a more efficient system, decrement this counter. And there was just a counter that did less and less weights. It was fantastic, because he was like, yeah, but I didn't screw it up the first time, and not on purpose at least. I made it as good as I could the first time, so why would I go and, you know, try and make it better? Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, definitely, just based on Gerald's comment. Office, yes, it is. It's from the movie Office Space. It's a classic. Anyway, it could also have disrupted businesses, like severely. It absolutely could, because if you couldn't rely on computer systems, then a lot of, like, it's even worse today, but even in 2000, there was a lot of stuff you couldn't do without computer systems working. Just think of something like logistics, you know, shipping companies. And then, of course, there were safety risks. You know, if hospitals stopped working, or, you know, traffic lights, whatever, all those sort of things. So there were a lot of concerns. a lot of concerns about it. And as Gerald said, nothing happened. Well, sort of, but we'll get back to that. I'll go back to that here in just a minute. So that was Y2K. So that's the six sort of little anecdotes. I did pretty quick because we don't have too much time, but I hope it gives you an idea of the past, right? Go look them up if you want, because they're quite interesting. So where are we at? What did we actually learn from all this? What did we learn from the Mars orbital lander? Anyone? My ex was convinced the world would end at Y2K. Yeah, I did. I heard people of that conviction as well. That was a bit extreme, but yes. Wasn't Y2K mostly an issue for satellites? I'm not sure. That's a good question. Anyway, so what came out of the Mars orbital lander is that they actually created something called a mission assurance review. So they created a whole, I think it's a department or at least a team that is in charge of this process so that this will never happen again. And this has been in, as far as I know, as far as I could figure out, this has been in effect for every single NASA mission since. So we did learn from it, right? So that's a win for software development, I think. Like the main thing is that we learn from these things because things are going to keep going wrong, as we see. Crypto. So what happened with Google Plus? Well, if in effect they didn't actually do anything. Google decided to just shut it down. Maybe it's because no one was using it, but there was no attempt to sort of mitigate any of it, except a lot of the business products now is actually based on the Google Plus code. Yeah, apparently, according to the internet, which is never wrong. But yeah, there was it got shut down in 2019, and they of course said it was because of no one's using it. We have other priorities. I think it's because it was just vulnerability issues. Yeah. Knight Capital Group. Well, they lost 70% of their value in one day, and then they tried to get more money and they couldn't, and they got taken over. And I don't know what the lesson was from all that. Who knows who the developers were that were actually in charge of it, but I don't know. Does anyone know? I couldn't find anything on the great Wikipedia page other than, yeah, it was bad. Android beta groups used to be Google Plus groups. Yeah, right. There you go. Renaming. I thought that was Microsoft's thing to rename everything all the time, but there you go. Yeah. Good comments here. I like this conversation. Keep it up. That's fantastic. Don't use use metrics. But anyway, I'm confused now. In regards to the ATM, this was actually kind of a nice story because the bank just decided to go, you know what, we screwed up. The customers didn't really do anything wrong. They just used the machine, even though they might have known, and they just took it on the chin, fixed the code, and let people have the money. Just wrote it off, which I thought that was kind of neat. And it was in Ohio, not Missouri. Yep. This was the much more interesting thing. The radiology machine, the X-ray machine, is that they've actually used this as a case study now. So apparently, if you're in the medical profession of software development for the medical industry, this is one of the case studies that's used on how not to do things. So I think that's kind of neat. I mean, it was quite tragic at the time, but it's still being used, allegedly. And then Y2K, we fixed it, right? Yeah. Actually, I think if we hadn't done anything, it would have been a lot worse. But because everything was sort of fixed and nothing really happened apart from one power plant in Japan went down, I reckon, and now it's written that people think it's a conspiracy theory. Maybe it was just to give us more work. I'm not sure. Yeah. So those are 6 stories from the history of software development. It's a light-hearted way to start the day, sort of, because we should learn from this, really. And it's a great way of sort of seeing what comes before us, because we're quite spoiled today as software developers. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of pre-written things. A lot of developers before us have done a lot of the hard work, which is cool because we can focus on a lot new, harder problems. But yeah, it's definitely worth bearing in mind. So what is the moral of this story? Well, first of all, test your damn code. I've done talks on testing in the cloud. I've done talks on Azure testing, and I can't say this often enough. Test your damn code. A lot of these stories wouldn't have been here if it had been with proper testing. There's value in testing and QA, as annoying as they can be sometimes. Actually, in fact, I forgot to say this before, with the radiology machine, there were, on the previous model of it, there was hardware safety switches because they didn't want this sort of stuff to happen. They removed those so they could make it cheaper and then relied on software. Yeah, and then didn't test it. So test your code, however you do it, integration test, unit test, UI test using Cucumber, whatever they're called. Just test your code in whatever way you can. Communication, I think, is probably the main thing, especially looking at the one of the Mars orbital lander. If they had just sort of maybe spoken to each other a little bit about software, they probably could have figured out that there was a discrepancy there, I would imagine. That seemed like a communication issue. Get rid of assumptions. Just hose them off. As soon as you start assuming things, and this is one of the things I always come back to, having enough experience, enough years of seeing how assumptions screw things up, do the communication thing first instead of assuming people know things. And then finally, listen to your damn users. Seriously. Like, I know we as developers think users are a bit of annoying and they always click buttons they shouldn't have and they break things, but they're kind of the business that we're in, right? So we can hope. Oh, sorry, I missed that chat. Oh, hopefully nothing major should rely on 32-bit systems by then. Yeah. Yeah, let's not go there. So, but that's all I had. There we go. My name's Lars Klint, and I hope you're going to have an awesome day. I may go to bed at one point because it's 8 p.m. here now, but up next is Sarah Young from Melbourne. She is amazing. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Lars, and I'm so glad you managed to get a llama in there just at the last minute. Well
I did say I would.
You did. That was fantastic, and a blast from the past, shall we say? Lots of things in there. The Y2K, the Mars rover,
yes,
and so much more. And actually, I love how you've got our chat so active because there's been so many fun stories being shared there.
But that's the nature of community, isn't it? We want people to engage and be part of it. Like, why else are we here? So it's not just to listen to me talk. Yeah, sure, I can come up with a funny story and get the day going, but I want to hear from the community. That's why we're here.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's been a fantastic start. The community is really active in the chat, and there are some really interesting little pieces of information coming out as well, which is fantastic to see. And you had a great message at the end. I know we were chatting about this yesterday, testing and developers. This is what happens when you don't test your code enough. So I guess we as developers we have a very responsible job in our hands.
Yeah.
Oh man, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Lars. It's been really great. Hopefully we'll get to see you in Europe sometime, maybe for a Dugfest or something again. But,
I'd love to come back.
Oh yeah, we'd love to have you.
Of course.
Thank you so much. It's been great. And I guess, as Lars already said, we can switch over now to also Melbourne, but Sarah, who is
more Melbourne.
Yeah, more Melbourne, more central Melbourne. We can switch over to Sarah, who works for Microsoft, and she's going to be talking about the security insights that we have in Azure. Security is obviously a really important thing. Lars mentioned there that if bugs and things happen in your code if you're not tested. Security equally just as important to make sure you're not leaving yourself susceptible to being hacked or anything like that.
Absolutely.
And, so we're going to learn a little bit, I think, about the tools that Azure gives us to control that, monitor that ourselves,
Absolutely.
and combat any issues that come up.
Yeah.